There have been some stories over the past couple of years about Democrats actively aiding illegal immigrants when it comes to ICE, when it comes to actual enforcement in this country. We have sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. So yes, there are local governments, mostly on the left, I think entirely on the left actually, that are defending illegal immigrants in this country from enforcement from federal authorities. But now we have a couple stories. One particularly is Cory Booker, a Democrat, actively aiding illegal immigration, meaning he accompanied actual illegal immigrants as they crossed the border and observed what happened and said he's going to fight Trump's policies. Now, we can get into a semantic argument over whether or not he actually aided them or whether or not they're asylum seekers. And this is one of the big challenges in the political debate. The left will say they're asylum seekers. I do not believe that's fair. Some certainly are. But the big problem I see is that many of these people are only claiming to be asylum seekers so they can be granted protections. In a story published by Vox, V-O-X, the left-wing website, they said some of the migrants were quoted as saying they missed PlayStation and they wanted Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm not saying all migrants are coming for Buffalo Wild Wings. It's highlighting specific examples from left-wing sources showing many of these migrants are not asylum seekers. In this instance, it's actually kind of confusing. And again, it's going to come down to semantics. So I know I will take heat for the way I've kind of presented the story, but it's the best I can do based on how I'm seeing what's going on. The reason why I would say Cory Booker is aiding in illegal immigration is because these are the women that he accompanied had previously been removed under the Remain in Mexico program, meaning their cases are already being processed, or it's possible they're coming for their hearing. I'm not entirely sure. But if they were removed previously and Cory Booker comes with them on the way back, he's providing press and political protection around them with his presence. So I would consider this to be people returning after it already being removed and, being told to wait, now just coming back in the country with the aid of a Democratic politician. There's also a story about Ocasio-Cortez giving advice on how to avoid ICE. And then we have a judge who is indicted for actually helping an illegal immigrant escape ICE agents. So let's read through these stories and go through what's going on. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a monthly PayPal option, a cryptocurrency option, and a physical address. But of course, the best thing you can do, share this video so you effectively act as a suggestion feed because YouTube no longer suggests my and many others' content. I rely on you. Here's the first story. Booker personally accompanied asylum seekers across the border. They say presidential hopeful Cory Booker was in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, on Wednesday and traveled with asylum seekers as they crossed the U.S. southern border. I will point out, Washington Examiner, which is where the story is from, is not a left-wing source. So they are saying asylum seekers. I think that's fair to point out. The New Jersey senator's trip to Mexico comes as the situation at the border has gained notoriety for the conditions at migrant detention centers. Cory observed the crossing, their interactions with federal immigration authorities, and the disastrous impact of President Trump's cruel immigration policies as the migrants attempted to avoid the so-called migrant protection protocols implemented by the Trump administration, an email from his campaign said. Booker helped 5 women make it to a U.S. shelter and not a detention center, according to Andrew Kimmel. Those women were originally sent back to Mexico under the migrant protection protocols, and Booker told reporters Wednesday that his office intends on keeping in touch with them. Now, here's why I said it's aiding illegal immigration, because they were already removed under the protocols, excuse me, and are actively trying to avoid them by returning, and they're being aided by a Democratic politician, which creates effectively a press and political shield. It's going to force ICE agents and CBP to act in, differently to how they would normally enforce border protections. We know these women were already removed. We know that they're supposed to be waiting for asylum, and they're actively trying to bypass the law. So let's do this. Some important points to bring up. The migrant protection protocols, according to the DHS, it's a U.S. government action whereby certain foreign individuals entering or seeking admission to the U.S. from Mexico illegally or without proper documentation may be returned to Mexico and wait outside of the U.S. for the duration of their immigration proceedings, where Mexico will provide them with all appropriate humanitarian protections for the duration of their stay. That means these women came to the U.S., said they wanted asylum, were told then to wait in Mexico and are now trying to illegally bypass U.S. government law and policy. Well, maybe it's not necessarily a law, but we can say they're trying to bypass these protocols put forth by DHS and otherwise. I pulled up Vox, the left-wing site, as a source specifically to address some of the concerns over what they're doing and how Cory Booker is helping them. In this story, they say, what is the U.S.'s new policy of returning asylum seekers to Mexico? They say, migrants traveling from Central America through Mexico have a legal right to seek asylum in the U.S., and that right is triggered when they set foot on U.S. soil, which is traditionally where they stay until their cases are resolved. Now, side note, many of the migrants coming, I believe most of them are claiming asylum, because that is a way you can get in the country, claim asylum, and then what happens is they say, okay, now come back and to your hearing in, a month and a half or whatever. Many people don't. It's disputed among the left and the right to what number. Certain organizations say I think it's Races, it's called. They said nearly all of the migrants we sponsor do go to their hearings. Sure, the ones they sponsor. Let's talk about the number of all of the migrants, the 100,000+ per month. Are they coming to their hearings? What are they doing? Or are they just being released into the U.S.? That was a big concern on the right. So Trump enacted this policy to return them to Mexico. The important point here, they're coming from Central America. The migrant protection protocols only apply to those from certain Central American countries, not Mexico. The question that's being brought up, why aren't they getting asylum in Mexico? Why are they going through Mexico to the U.S. if they really need asylum? They'll be safe in Mexico, and Mexico can provide them with aid. If these women were removed based on the MPP, they're safe in Mexico getting the aid they need. Why then violate those protocols, and why would Cory Booker help them? Let's read more from what Vox has to say. Under the new policy, though, when migrants present themselves to CBP agents to seek asylum, they're given a date in a U.S. immigration court 45 days in the future to start their asylum case, and then turned over to Mexican authorities to stay in Mexico until the 45 days are up. The policy, which the Trump administration calls the Migrant Protection Protocols and others call the Remain in Mexico policy, applies only to Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, and isn't being used for children trying to enter the U.S. without an adult. It relies on a rarely used provision in immigration law, which allows the U.S. to return certain people who enter from a contiguous territory to be returned to that contiguous territory until their claim for legal status is either accepted or denied. This is the law. I think it's fair to point out, these are migrants entering the country illegally in violation of a policy after already being admitted to try and avoid the law, being aided by Cory Booker. The Democrats are in a bubble on this issue. They're making Americans feel like strangers in their own country because we have Democrats actively campaigning for non-Americans. Sure, there's a small subset of Twitterati leftists who might agree with this, but it's not mainstream. The group that agrees with this may be growing, that's true, but it is not mainstream America. So I want to move on from here because I think I've made the point. Cory Booker just aided illegal immigration. The law is clear. They are not from Mexico. They can wait in Mexico, whether you agree or not. It is illegal immigration aided by a Democrat. We also have this story from a couple weeks ago. Ocasio-Cortez gives illegal immigrants advice on evading federal law enforcement. From the Daily Caller, they say, New York Rep AOC used her Twitter account Saturday to give illegal immigrants advice about evading a potential ICE roundup. She's saying, warning, the Trump admin is expected to begin ICE raids across the country tomorrow targeting people for roundup. Ocasio-Cortez wrote, now is the time for us to come together. Check in with your neighbors. Share Know Your Rights info. If you see ICE, report to United We Dream. I will push back a bit on the conservative approach to this. I will not, look, AOC is in every right to tell people they have rights and to reach out to organizations for protection. But it is fair to point out she is telling illegal immigrants how to avoid ICE. So look, there's a bit of, it's not black and white on the issue. Ocasio-Cortez isn't necessarily breaking the law by telling people how to uphold their rights. In fact, that's not a bad thing, but she is providing aid to illegal immigration. Take it for what you will. I'm not putting my opinion on that one. I know the left and the right are both going to come after me for it. She says, please share this info widely and make sure your neighbors have it. If your home can be a safe space or haven for others, let your neighbors and community know, even if it's just to relax in the stress of this time. Plan, prepare, protect your neighbors. Now, this is where I think she actually does cross the line. Telling people to harbor illegal immigrants, I believe that could actually be a violation of the law. Maybe not telling people to do so, But harboring illegal immigrants to hide them from federal authorities, I believe that is actually a crime. There's somebody who is being charged right now for harboring illegal immigrants. I don't know if AOC can be in trouble for advocating for people to break the law, but perhaps. But let's go back in time. You want to have an argument about AOC's comments on Twitter? Fine. But let's take a look at this. This is a story from last year in February where they say ICE begins deportation raids in Northern California as federal officials blame Oakland mayor. Why? A Democrat warned illegal immigrants about what was happening. They say, the arrests began on Sunday, a day after Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf, a Democrat, issued an unusual warning to her constituents that she had learned from multiple credible sources that ICE was planning an operation in the Bay Area. Schaaf is one of many mayors around the country at the helm of a sanctuary city, one that has barred, city employees from helping federal immigration agents. And she has been particularly outspoken on the issue of immigration, saying in interviews that she'd be willing to go to jail to protect residents from deportation. So there's a little bit more here. On Tuesday, ICE Deputy Director Thomas Homan seemed to blame her for the fact that a number of suspected undocumented immigrants were still at large. Quote, thanks to the dedication and professional work of ICE deportation officers, we were able to remove many public safety threats from the streets of the Bay Area during the past few days. However, 864 criminal aliens and public safety threats remain at large in the community. And I have to believe that some of them were able to elude us thanks to the mayor's irresponsible decision. We've seen calls for sanctuary cities for some time. We've seen sanctuary states. This means that they basically refuse to work with federal authorities. So when it comes to this Democratic mayor of a sanctuary city, I can't say I'm surprised. But it's a huge step up what we're seeing now. From creating a space that won't cooperate with ICE to actively warning people about a potential ICE raid. And now it brings us to an update in another story. To judges actively abetting criminal evasion of ICE. It's one thing to say we won't cooperate. It's another thing that a judge and a bailiff are accused of allowing immigrants to escape through a basement to avoid being deported. That's a whole new level. This story from the Mercury News. Indicted Massachusetts judge nixed deal in ICE obstruction case. Offer from U.S. attorney required she admit to helping immigrant flee courthouse, they say. Newton District Court Judge Shelley Richmond Joseph was offered a deal to avoid prosecution if she admitted she helped an illegal immigrant escape out a basement door in the courthouse to avoid ICE agents last year. The deal that Joseph turned down was offered up by U.S. Attorney Andrew Lelling's office. A source familiar with the matter told the Herald. Joseph, 51, of Natick, was indicted last month on federal charges of obstruction of justice and aiding and abetting for allegedly interfering with a federal investigation. The state Supreme Judicial Court quickly announced it had suspended Joseph without pay effective immediately. They also go on to say that a trial court officer, Wesley McGregor, was indicted on charges of obstruction of justice and aiding and abetting as well as perjury. Joseph and McGregor have both pleaded not guilty, and Judge Jennifer Bull released them both on their own recognizance. Now, I will say innocent until proven guilty, but this seems to fall in line with the narrative we have seen thus far. From actively, creating sanctuary cities so they won't work with ICE, to warning illegal immigrants, to then abetting them, allegedly, to now having Cory Booker actually go with them, providing physical protection to an extent. Right? Obviously, if they got arrested, who knows what would have happened. But Cory Booker created a massive PR spectacle, which in my opinion would result in government agents acting differently to how they normally would. That's the PR effect. They're going to back off and say, whatever, let him do his thing. To stress, the women that Cory Booker was with had previously been removed under immigration law and were actively, according to the story, trying to avoid the MPP, the migrant protection policies, and come back into the U.S. in violation of that law. And there we are. Democrats now actively engaging in this behavior. I want to make a couple more points on this story. What we're seeing here, in my opinion, is the Democrats just going nuts. Plain just nuts. Beto O'Rourke travels across Mexico border and meets with asylum seekers. Once again, a conservative outlet calling them asylum seekers. Sure. I think it's fair to call them that, but almost all of them are claiming asylum, even though they're not claiming asylum in Mexico, which makes, to me, very little sense. Mexico is not some backwater, dangerous place. It's actually very nice. Mexico City is actually very beautiful. It's curious why they would go through Mexico to the United States. Now, again, they're in their legal right to claim asylum here, but they're not in their legal right to bypass the law, which states if they're in a contiguous territory when they come, they can be sent back to that territory to wait, which is what's happening. Why would Beto O'Rourke go and meet with asylum seekers? It feels like Democrats are actively campaigning in a foreign country. This to me is absurd. Listen, you can support the asylum seekers. You can defend the rights of undocumented immigrants. Those can all be debated. But to see Cory Booker and Beto O'Rourke now go to Mexico to aid non-citizens, I throw it back to the opinion posted by the New York Times. Americans are being made to feel like strangers in their own country. The Democrats aren't campaigning for Americans. They're on stage saying they're going to provide health care to illegal immigrants and they won't deport them. Now they're actually going to Mexico. It was a funny joke when Trump supporters said the Democrats are trying to become president of Mexico. But I got to ask you what they're doing. What are they doing? Are they going to go to middle Americans and tell them how they're going to secure their jobs and protect the economy and make sure their kids can go to school? Apparently not. Apparently their priority is Mexico, to talk to people who aren't citizens. I get it. We want to protect asylum seekers. But what about showing up to California and talking to the homeless? What about going to New York and talking to the homeless? This is a PR spectacle, and it's a stunt that I'm going to bet is going to backfire. There are a lot of problems with what's happening on the border outside of just, listen, we've got homeless people. We know they're homeless. We know many are mentally ill. We know many can't find jobs. I would appreciate them to go to Skid Row. Instead, they go to Mexico. Well, let me tell you something. You can look at the homeless problem in California and ask why is the problem being solved and actively work towards solving that problem. That makes sense. These are American citizens. They're homeless. We have problems with traffickers, recycling children, they call it. Laura Logan reports cartels are renting kids to families so they can come across the border and claim to be a family. Then those kids get sent back and they do it again. The kids are being used as a shield. This has been reported before. So what ends up happening, in my opinion, is the Democrats chasing after the Twitterati nonsense, start believing just ridiculous, absurd, fringe, far-left rhetoric, and then they actively chase after it. The protester is not the voter. But of course, they're trying to win those votes for the Democratic primary. Here's the problem. If you want to win the presidency, you need moderates. People like me. People who didn't vote for Trump. People who are traditionally Democratic or on the left, who are willing to vote for a Democrat. But not you. Not when you're going, so look, they're all going to run. They're going to actively abet, and aid illegal immigrants. They're going to campaign in Mexico, and people like me are going to be like, yeah, dude, I'm not going to vote for you. You can win the primary, sure, but what then? It's a cathartic victory. You win, congratulations, and now you lose the presidency because you're too far to the left. Congratulations on winning the vote of regressive far-left activists, but why would any middle American want to vote for you? This is an impasse for the Democratic Party. You need the fringe activists to actually win the nomination, but by doing so, you will never win the actual presidency because most Americans don't believe in this nonsense. There's a couple things that I want to point out. Moving beyond this, talk more beyond what the Democrats are doing. I want to talk a little bit about this video put out by CBP Arizona. They say, here is a look inside of a Border Patrol processing center with Chief Patrol Agent of the Tucson sector, Roy Villarreal. In this video, which I'm not going to play because it's a few minutes long and those on the podcast, you can't see it anyway. But he actually shows the detention center for migrants in the Tucson area is fairly nice. There's food and snacks available. There's clean water. There's shirts. There's toothbrushes. They have medicine. He shows the water works. He even drinks from the potable water fountain toilet combo himself. However, forgive me for not taking the government tour of a facility that's not El Paso with a grain of salt. Ocasio-Cortez and other Democrats went to the El Paso detention center. We've seen photos. It's not good. We've heard stories. It's also not good. Tucson sector may be great, but of course CBP is going to show us the best of the best. It would be nice if we had some honest journalists who could actually get into these facilities and show us what's really going on. It won't happen. So for now, you have the right who will believe CBP and the left who will say who believe Ocasio-Cortez. The right will say she's lying. The left will say CBP is lying. But I'm going to point out, I'm not going to believe the government. I'm sorry. CBP, I don't think you're a rogue agency. I don't think they're actively trying to hurt people. But I do think they're trying to show us their Potemkin village, the best of the best in these facilities. Plain and simple, I think the rational approach is this. There's problems on the border. The facilities, many of them are not well. Some of them are pretty good. We need money. The Democrats have finally agreed to it, but AOC still obstructs. They obstructed from the get-go. If they didn't, perhaps we wouldn't be in this problem. I don't need to see CBP showing me this border facility to convince me things are okay. I'm not going to believe you anyway. But I can understand if the Democrats just said we're going to fund this, things would be, look, we'd be okay. But now I want to highlight just a couple more issues that I think are important in terms. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I have a couple other stories showing how the Democrats really are losing the plot. Really, really are losing the plot. And they're believing this insane far-left Twitterati nonsense, which results in Cory Booker actually going and helping illegal immigrants. Okay, I think you've gone so far away from where Barack Obama was. Think about it. Obama in 2012 was still deporting illegal immigrants. They called him deporter-in-chief, and he defended the policies. He defended child separation. He defended all of this. These facilities existed under Obama. Now, you've got Cory Booker helping illegal immigrants. That's a mirror image to where Obama was. So you're going to ask me, I voted for Obama one time, you're going to ask me to now vote for these people who are so far to the left of Obama I can't recognize them? It's never going to happen. I don't see how they plan to win. I'll leave it there. And we'll pick up in the next segment, youtube.com/TimCastNews. For those in the podcast, it'll be like in 2 segments from now. And we're going to talk about the 4th of July, which is today, and how Twitter is just going insane. I don't understand how the Republicans have remained grounded for the most part. We've seen the data. Republicans have moved a little to the right. Democrats have just shot straight to the left. Maybe it's because the Democrats don't operate strictly on emotion. They operate on 5 moral foundations, and the left just on care and harm. Makes it very easy for the left to be manipulated into believing and supporting nonsense, like straight up illegal immigration. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segments will be coming up shortly. YouTube.com/TimCastNews, and I will see you all there.